In this episode, Scott and I will be talking about how to position and grow your business when competing with the corporate giants of your industry. This is the Stretch Goals Podcast, where each week we'll share insights and lessons learned based on our experiences as entrepreneurs. We'll challenge you to create ambitious goals as you start and grow your business. I'm your host, Robert Dickerson.
And I'm Scott Davis.
So your competitors have been working on the problem you're trying to solve for years. They have large teams. They've raised millions of dollars. So how do you compete with these industry giants? And that's going to be the focus of our episode today. So Scott, I wanted to talk about in this episode, each of us starting our companies and how we've competed with large established players. I know with MapOut, so with MapOut, we're developing essentially a learning management system. And there are a ton of competitors out there, and this is a pretty large space. And you know, every day I read about competitors of ours that have raised tens of millions of dollars, and they have large teams. And sometimes it can be really tough to focus on the problems that I'm trying to solve when I see all these people raising all this money, and they have these huge teams, and I'm really running with a pretty lean, small team. And so I thought it'd be good today to talk about the challenges that we face in growing our business. Basically, I think of them, and I think you said too, is there are opportunities that you have that maybe some of those bigger players don't. So I think one of the first things for me, at least at MapOut, is I've really started out by creating a company that has a value added. So what is the niche that I'm trying to carve out and scale? What is the customer base that I'm really focusing on? And for MapOut, I really started to focus on mobile and the mobile apps. And the reason for that is existing learning management systems don't really have a strong focus in the mobile space. But if you think about how you learn, the devices that people are carrying every day, they're carrying their phones, they're carrying their tablets. And so the value add of MapOut is that we can deliver video training directly to their phone so people can watch it. They can take it with them. They can have the videos available offline. And so our focus and how we compete with these large companies is that we really focus on a mobile approach and doing that really well. And so that's able to differentiate ourselves. So talk a little bit about MobX. I know with Critical Technologies, you were doing some minor league baseball apps. So how did you differentiate those companies from your competitors?
When I was with Critical Technologies Group, which was a company that I founded, looking back at some of our previous podcasts, it very much started as a side project and grew. But skipping forward into the future a little bit, I realized that there was opportunities and things that I was passionate about, which specifically is sports and more specifically was baseball. And, I looked at it and I was like, these teams, they don't have an app. Major League Baseball has an app, but these individual minor league teams don't have an app. And minor league baseball was trying to put together some website where you could come in and you could view statistics and videos and scores and schedules, but it wasn't specific to all these individual teams. And the individual teams, they live and die off of these promotions and things that get fans in the stadium because they're not a large entity. In a lot of cases, some of these stadiums have less than 3,000 seats, and then other ones are larger because they're in a bigger market. But there's a wide array, and so I knew that as someone who was passionate about the sport, and I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna go to these guys, cold call them, show up at their door, and tell them what I can do for them, and that worked for me. And what was great about it is there were some larger companies that were trying to do things, but they were creating these complex solutions that didn't really target what minor league baseball needed, what these smaller sports establishments, needed. And keep in mind, these are when I say small, I mean they're still bringing in, millions of fans a year, so they're still rather large, but they have very specific needs. They're very much run like a small business. I just basically said, this is an opportunity for me. I can be more flexible than these larger competitors. And I went in and I did that, and I did it well, and I did everything that I wanted. I met all of their needs. I ended up having market share within a year. I had more than 50% of minor league baseball running my apps with 10 million fans using it every day. So I just went full speed ahead. I steamrolled. But for me, there was big competition, which was Major League Baseball and minor league baseball as a whole, and some bigger competitors. But I didn't really look at them as competition. I looked at them as people who were stagnant and didn't have a good vision. So one question I had for you, was mobile your idea from inception? Was that your key differentiator? Was that like a part of your your business plan from the get-go, and that was like to target and compete with these other competitors, or did that just come organically? Like, were you like building this product and then you were like, man, what's going to make me stand out is mobile? Like how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I think it was organically, because when I started out doing a lot of research around the existing systems that were out there, and trying to think about, well, how do I stand out from the existing competition and what's out there? A lot of learning management systems have responsive web pages and things like that, but they didn't have a native mobile app. And so I thought about, well, the native mobile app, you can do things beyond the web page, like download the videos. You can provide a more seamless experience. People can go download the app from the App Store, so that's another marketing channel. And so it kind of grew from there, and talking to customers and figuring out, well, what do you really need in terms of delivering this content? Because if you think about millennials and some of the new generation coming into the workforce, they're more used to using their phone to do a lot of things. And so having training behind, a VPN that you have to log into and making it really difficult to access, those are barriers for people that actually never use that training. And so companies are focusing a lot of money into growing these huge training courses that no one uses because they're unable to access it. And so that was really my focus with MapOut, was trying to add that value add in mobile, and then going out to companies and pitching them on why they should take their existing courses into the mobile realm. And I really tried to focus on, I guess, maybe a revolutionary approach as opposed to an incremental approach. So how do I take learning to the next level? How do I weave it into the culture of the company more in a revolutionary way, as opposed to trying to match feature for feature with existing systems, right? Because if I try to go feature by feature, I'm never going to get there, because they have larger teams. They have, they've been doing this for years. So I have to figure out a way to position myself where I'm not directly competing with them, where someone can like look at my features and look at their features and say, well, you don't have X, Y, and Z, so I'm just going to go with this guy over here.
Yeah, no, and you actually touched on the point that we talked about last week. Perfection versus launching. If you sit there and try to perfect your product and match your competitors feature for feature, you're never going to launch your product, and then you're just going to launch the same thing that your competitors have. So put out something that's got some bells and whistles that the other guy doesn't. Target your niche, and is online with your vision, and just get it out there, and then add in some features as you go along. That's great feedback. I was just curious. I'm always interested in what makes people choose the decisions that they made, and why and when. So thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to touch on too that you were talking about is, you identified the opportunity with the critical technology. So you identified that Major League Baseball had this problem. They needed to pull all this stuff together into a mobile app. And that's really similar to what I did with MapOut, is I identified, hey, there's an opportunity here. And so the question I had for you was, what was the pitch when you went into these companies? So as you were co-calling these minor league baseball teams, what was the pitch that you were throwing them? Because a lot of times companies, large companies don't give small companies the time of day. And so you really have to hustle and outwork them. So, talk a little bit about what your pitch was and, why you had confidence in that they would buy into this.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And the story of how I ended up starting with minor league baseball is that I was a season ticket holder for the AA affiliate of the San Francisco Giants, which is the Richmond Flying Squirrels. And by the way, there's no flying squirrels in Richmond, Virginia. But I was a season ticket holder, and it was the first season. They hadn't had a game yet, and I was like, I was building mobile apps, and I was just like, man, they need an app. And because I had communication through the front office to buy my tickets, I didn't have a great relationship, but I at least had a contact. So I hit up the contact and said, hey, can I do a mobile app for you? And I got blown off. A week or two later, there was an article in the newspaper that talked about the community relations manager and the director of baseball operations. And I took both of their contacts. I called them both. I emailed them both. It just so happened they were on winter break. And this was in December. And the season was starting in April. And I didn't get back any calls or anything. I didn't know that they were on break. I called them back every week. They were gone for 2 weeks, and their community relations manager was like, yeah, no, we're super excited. We've been talking about it since we got your email, and what do we need to do? So, I mean, basically, I met with them. I told them that I didn't have a product. This was just an idea, and I basically asked them like, hey, I want to build this, but I need your I'm using you as my star power to get this out there. Like, you're the brand. I'm just coming up with the product. Like, tell me what you need. I'll do all of that. And then I'm going to throw in a bunch of things that I think you need as a fan. And they were on board. And I told them I would do it for free because it was a risk for them. It was a risk for me, but I just wanted to do it knowing full well that if it was successful, I would get additional opportunities later. So I did a first iteration. I got all the features in that I wanted. We went back and forth. We got it launched before opening day. It really wasn't what I wanted to do, but with the time crunch, I only had 2 to 3 months to get this like really robust product ready, and it was cutting edge. Like, we had real time, statistics and scores from every team, and nobody had that. Major League Baseball didn't even have that yet, so it was very cutting edge. But what I needed to do is get that into a better vision for myself and scale it up to sell it. And when I did that, what I did is I created this new framework, and teams started calling me because they saw this one app. Teams were calling me, and that was great, right? Don't get me wrong. I reached out to teams. I emailed teams. I called them and was selling it too. But I had people coming to me and because they wanted it. So I then went to a couple trade shows and just put myself out there and just had great visuals. I sold people on my passion for baseball, my passion for building mobile apps. And then this is going to sound bad, but they took the bait per se. They were all in on me as I was all in on their product, and so it was a natural sale for me. But when I called them and when I emailed them, it was basically like, "Hey, I see you don't have a mobile app. This is what I've done. This is how successful it's been. I see what your market is. Here's how I can benefit you, and just let me know if we can help. I'd love to have a chat." And if they didn't respond back, that was fine. I would try again in a couple of months. I had a list. I would just keep going back to them. But I'm a persistent person, but not nagging, because I think there's a differentiation there. You don't want to nag somebody, but you always want them to remember that you're there. So you plant the seed, and then you plant the seed again, and then hopefully you get a whole row of crops at the end of it. You know what I mean? So that's basically was my approach, was just show them how I was better, show them what I could do, show them why I cared about their fans and about what was important to them. And then that turned up into lots of sales for me.
Yeah, I mean, they were buying into you and to your passion more than a product. And I think that's really important as you're starting to sell things. Is people are buying you. They're buying your passion, and it's a transaction between people. So you really have to think about it like that. And I think the part you brought up about continuously contacting these people. I think about my own email and people emailing me. It's like, things get buried, right? You don't intentionally ignore people. It's just people have a lot going on. So I think that's really important, is you have to be persistent. You have to keep reaching out to people and calling them and showing you're interested. And I think after a while, people will start feeling bad that they didn't respond to you, right? And they say, "Oh, this guy keeps emailing me. I should, at least send him an email back."
Well, think about how many people historically have called Warren Buffett every day, or called or emailed Tim Cook every day at Apple, and eventually they get a response. And mostly it's to shut them up, but at the same time, like, they realize, like, hey, if this guy has the drive to do this, maybe it's somebody we should work with in some capacity. So I mean, there's some truth to that, but again, there's a fine line. I did it very naturally, like, hey, I just want to talk to you. Let me know if I can help you out, and it worked out well for me, and I still do that to this day.
I went to a sales conference, I guess about a month or two ago, and they were talking about it really takes 7 to 8 touch points before you can really set up that meeting. And they said most people give up at about 4. So if you think about that, that's a lot of touches. That's a lot of following up with people, sending them relevant information. Not necessarily through email, but phone calls, but your email list, other things. So there can be other ways you touch these people too.
I think there's a key though. Like, I never ever once approached it as a sales opportunity. I'm not a salesman. I never made it seem like I was that oily, snaky car salesman guy trying to sell you a Corvette just because you drove through the lot. I was never that guy. But I was like, hey man, I love baseball. I love what you're doing. I love your team. Here's how I can help you. Let me know if you're interested. If not, man, have a great season. Like, it was never a very formal thing. Like every single email I wrote was very, very individual and targeted. I didn't send out mail blasts. I did everything individually. I knew who they were, how many fans they had last year, what their record was. I knew everything about them. And that allowed me to connect with them and ask them questions like, hey, so you guys are in first place right now. Like, that's awesome. Like, so-and-so hit a home run last night. And they connect with that. So whoever your customer is, sports doesn't have to be the exception. Whoever your customer is, know who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and that allows you to connect. And then it's a friendship. And then if it turns into something more, that's great. But when they like you and they like that you understand them, they're going to be more likely to give you business than that other guy who's calling them.
Yeah, I think showing a genuine interest and passion around, what they're trying to do. And I've used that a lot as well because I hate when people send me salesy type emails and, they're trying to get me to buy something. So when I connect with people, I had coffee with a guy the other day and, I just reached out to him, sent him an email and said, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing, let's chat. And I think I'm working kind of in the same area. And it was a great conversation, and there wasn't a lot of sales there, just, hey, let's see if we can help each other out. And I think that's really important as you're growing your business is, you want to help them out, and it's kind of a mutual relationship there. Help each other.
Yeah, and those people will reach back out to you years down the line. They'll come back to you and say, hey, remember 5 years ago we talked about this? Well, now I'm ready to do something with you. So they remember those conversations and those contacts. So
yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to quantify those relationships and what it means, right?
Yeah.
You just really don't know. I mean, you just have to connect with as many people as you can and treat them like you would want to be treated and, see if there's a way you can help. And you never know when that relationship's going to turn around and, you can help them out, they can help you out. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So I think the other thing is to carve out a niche. And going back to what you did with minor league baseball is, you really focused down on just minor league baseball and helping them with the apps. And then once you were able to carve out that niche, you were able to iterate over that across all the baseball teams. And so I think that's really a great way to start your business because you identified a niche that needed help, but then you also had a way to kind of iterate over all the teams. Once you got one team going, you just needed one, then you could iterate and continue over all the teams. So I think that's a really good way to kind of grow your business.
Yeah, and I also went to other sports after that too because the door was opened, and that applies to any product anywhere. I mean, it's the same approach. Once you're in the door, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I think that sometimes that's the hardest part is getting your foot in the door, right? Given that you got to find that person that's willing to buy into you and give you that opportunity.
Right. Yeah, that's where most people stop. They either get cold feet or whatever. And look, I'm not a guy who goes up and talks to the prettiest woman in the room. Like, it's just not me. Like, I don't want that rejection. But when it comes to being passionate about something, I'm going to talk about it all day. This is a slight tangent, but, Rob can tell you, we've known each other a long time. Rob knows how passionate I am about what I do because one day at lunch in high school, I was talking about programming for probably a solid week straight, and Rob had enough. And Rob basically told me to shut up and talk about something else so we can enjoy our lunch. And that's just how I am, though. Like, you remember that, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that passion and that drive is what makes good entrepreneurs, right? Is that you have to be passionate. You have to always be thinking about,
right, how
you grow your business. And I mean, your wife may be similar to mine as I talk about my businesses all the time. I'm sure she, Tracy gets really annoyed with me. So, I mean, I think that's a benefit for your company that you have a passion and that you're willing to really double down and focus on it every day. Because I think it really is, growing a business is a hustle. You have to grind and outwork your competitors. And so you really have to have that mindset because a lot of times it's just you or a small team or, you're just starting out. So you really have to hustle.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was at my first trade show, there was other competitors there who were doing mobile apps and they had like maybe 7 teams and feature for feature, they couldn't compete. And I knew that. But what I found out is they had come and taken my pamphlet from my booth when I wasn't there, and they were like looking at all my pinpoints and like trying to then sell people that they could do these features, which they couldn't. And somebody came by and told me. I just thought it was funny. And instead of like launching an attack on them, I was just like, man, I don't need to. Like, I can sell these people on passion all day. So somebody came by and asked me like, hey, why should we choose you over them? And I'm like, they don't know baseball. And, you know, I'm like, just go ask them a question about baseball. So, I mean, I out hustle them in a very personal way. It wasn't a, you know, feature for feature price point. Like, I didn't have to change my pricing. I didn't have to do anything. I sold them on me, like you said.
Yeah, and people are going to copy you, right? They're going to see that you're successful, and so they're going to start copying feature for feature.
Right. I think there's one thing that we haven't talked about yet. I mean, we've kind of touched on it, but we haven't really gone into it deep, and that's being more agile than these larger competitors. And specifically, you know, what I mean is when you've got these larger entities, especially if you're competing with large corporations, they're not as flexible. They can't bend their product to match the customer need because it's not in their financial interest, because they've got large amounts of overhead, hundreds of employees, thousands of employees, whatever the case may be. You don't. You've got lower overhead, you've got more flexibility, you've got more passion. Bend your product to work with these customers. And that, you know, that allows you to tailor your solution to what they need. And then you kind of kill them with this over-the-top customer service that you also can't get in these large corporate world. You know, nobody wants to call and get a help desk. They want to email or text or call you and be like, hey, man, I got a problem. And they want to hear you say, yeah, all right, cool, we'll take a look at it. Like, and that's like another way that a small business or a solopreneur, anybody can compete with giants in these areas and far exceed what they're providing. And that's why like Airbnb and Uber and all these companies are successful, because they're giving you like these personal relationships, and they can do it better than large taxi unions, you know, or large hotel chains. Like, that's why they're successful. And like, that's probably one of the keys for competing against giants, you know, in these areas. And then obviously we've got pricing, and obviously you can tweak your pricing. You know, maybe Rob, you want to talk about how you can make your pricing more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to, you know, the tailoring and the service-oriented area of staying competitive, I found that's a really big benefit there, is that I can go to customers and I can say, hey, we've got this product, but we can tailor it to fit your exact problem and really create a solution that will solve it, right? And a lot of large companies can't do that because either they don't have the bandwidth, or, you know, they're only focusing on really large customers, and so some of these smaller customers they're not able to service. And so that's really an area that I've focused on, is once you have a product, being able to tailor and customize it is a huge advantage, because people want something that's personalized for their customers and for them.
Yeah, and the big companies, they can't do that. Like they've got too many like procedures and processes. Like, they can't take resources away from these larger initiatives and focus on these things. Financially, it's not beneficial to them. So you hit it on the head. I mean, that's a great way to compete.
Or even their overhead for their employees is so large that, you know, they can't compete on price, right? Because their hourly rate is so big that customers don't want to pay that, right? They don't want to pay 2 and 3 times what the market bears for a developer or whatnot. So, you know, that's an area that, as a small company, I always, you know, when I worked for you know, for other companies, especially large companies, it always amazed me like how much per hour they were charging for developers. And if I just thought about, well, hey, if I had another couple people, I could develop this thing for a quarter of the price, right? And so, you know, you got to think about that too, is that they're charging a lot more. When I was developing circuit boards, you know, a large Fortune 500 company I work with wouldn't take jobs less than $1 million. And that cuts away a ton of work, you know, below $1 million. I mean, we were doing, you know, in the tens of thousands of dollar jobs sometimes. And so I started taking those kind of jobs that other people wouldn't even compete against.
Right. Yeah. Those are great targets, you know. You go out and find these customers that can't do what you can.
So just to wrap up, I think this has been a really good discussion just about, you know, identifying opportunities, being confident, really pitching yourself and your passion as a way to differentiate yourself from large companies. You know, we talked really about focusing on the customer bases that might be ignored, and focusing down on that niche that you can then scale into and iterate around. And then, you know, you got to hustle. You got to outwork I think that's really something you have to focus on, is how do you outwork, and every day just come back and keep focusing down on that.
Yeah, man. And the thing is, like, be yourself. Like, if I tried to be this corporate salesman guy, like trying to sell products, I'd never be successful. Well, maybe, I don't know, but I wouldn't be as successful as I am. Like, I just am what I am. I annoy people, I get on people's nerves, but I make damn good products, man. And I'm passionate about it. So, like, that's me, and that's how I go out and sell. And that's what you should do. Like, I'm not saying try to be me. I'm saying be yourself. Like, whatever it is that works for you, like, do it. And let that shine through in your product, and you can compete with anybody out there. You got to have the hustle, you got to outwork them, got to have great focus, you got to be adaptable, and you get all those things together, and you can compete with literally anybody in the market.
This is making me excited. I'm going to go make some phone calls now. So stop listening to this episode and go make some phone calls, go get it done, hustle. Reach out to us, let us know how things are going, how you're competing with giants. We're always interested to hear those things.
All right, guys. See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Stretch Goals podcast. You can access the show notes for this episode and listen to other episodes by heading over to stretchgoals.fm.